Hi, Emily here from Homemade Emily Jane, and today I'm excited to share with you a quick and easy tutorial for making snowballed half rectangle triangles. This technique is a new half rectangle triangle technique featured in the Luminary quilt pattern, which I will share with you more about in a little bit. If you're unfamiliar with half rectangle triangles, or HRTs for short, they're similar to half square triangles, but instead of a square, it's a rectangle. These are typically in a 1:2 ratio, so it might be 1 inch wide by 2 inches high, or 2:4 or 3:6, etc. They are typically tall and skinny or short and wide and can be oriented different ways. Traditionally, HRTs can be a little bit tricky. If you want to see a full tutorial on the traditional method, go ahead and check out this tutorial here. Now this tutorial is going to show you how to do using a snowball cornered method or a stitch and flip method, so it does add a little bit more simplicity. One common complaint about this might be a little bit of excess waste, but I'm going to share with you additional tips on how to use that excess waste to turn it into additional quilt blocks that you can use on another project. One of my favorite things about using snowballed cornered half rectangle triangles is that it eliminates a lot of tedious trimming, and for some designs it eliminates a lot of excess seams. So for example, in the Luminary quilt pattern, I chose this method because it eliminated so many seams and made the quilt so much more efficient. This snowballed HRT method is particularly great for new quilters that want a more approachable way to make some HRTs. All right, let's go ahead and dive into some supplies and materials that you will need to make a snowballed corner half rectangle triangle. First off, of course, you'll need fabric. For this example, I'm just using a piece of this lighter fabric for the background and this teal for the snowballed corner. You can use a finished quilt block, you can use squares, rectangles, any kind of shape of fabric for your background. That will be the size of your finished block. And then your corner, you want to make any piece that is 1:2 in terms of ratio, plus a 1/2 inch on each side for seam allowance. As far as the fabric size goes, I will cover more about that in the next section. Other tools that you'll need a rotary cutter and a quilting ruler. I'm going to use this one by Creative Grids. And you'll need a fabric marking tool. So there are so many different options. You might see me use a hair marker quite often, which uses this to make a crease in the fabric. You can use a chalk pencil, a heat erasing pen, a water soluble pen. Whatever quilt marking tools you have on hand will be perfectly fine. And as always, you'll need a sewing machine with your 1/4 inch presser foot and a nice hot iron and an ironing surface. Once you have all your supplies, let's go ahead and dive in. We'll start with some quilt math to talk about the size and dimensions of this HRT corner that we are snowballing. So you'll want a rectangle piece of fabric to turn into that corner triangle. As I mentioned, it'll be a 1:2 ratio. So it could be 2 inches wide by 4 inches tall, but you'll need to also add seam allowance. So very simple quilt math, whatever size you want that finished triangle to be, so 2 inches by 4 inches, 3 inches by 6 inches, etc. You'll want to add a 1/2 inch to each side. So it could be 2.5 by 4.5, or 3.5 by 6.5, even could be 4.5 by 8.5 to have a 4:8. So lots of options. You can go all the way down to the 1/4 inch would be common within quilting. So if you wanted to do like a 2.25 by 4.5 inch, you could do that. Just add a 1/2 inch on both corners, on both edges, so that you have your seam allowance. So the possibilities for sizing are really quite endless. I'm not going to cover too much about that here in this video because we're not following a specific pattern or design, but you can use your creativity to make your own, or you can follow a pattern like some of the patterns that I have in my shop. So all in all, feel free to size up or size down that rectangle that you're using for the triangle corner, and I'm sure it'll look great either way. For this example, it really doesn't matter what size we use. We're just practicing. Once you have all of your supplies gathered, let's go ahead and get started. Now the first step is marking your pieces. So I've grabbed a couple different marking tools that we can use. The background rectangle that I'm using, as well as the triangle snowball that I'm going to use. For this example, I'm going to snowball this corner right here. So you can see I've got this piece, but you want to arrange it so that you can see which direction you're flipping. So for this one, we basically do the opposite side. So if I'm going this way, we're going to rotate it this way. We're going to draw that line so that it could flip this way, right? So it's going to be a little bit wonky to figure out at first, but once you do, you can see we're going to draw on the wrong side of the fabric from one corner to the next. So just like this, I'm using my quilting ruler. You can use your marker or a pen. I'm going to use the hair marker just to create a crease in that fabric. You can see it's very, very faint, but it is there, and I'll be able to use that to stitch on that line. Now we need to mark where to line it up here so that we can have this fabric sewn on like so. So when we mark, there are a few different ways that you can do it. The pattern that I have, the Luminary pattern, uses one specific method, but because I want this to be super versatile for any size background piece, we are going to layer our rectangle on top of our background piece and mark the edges here. So no matter what size rectangle you're using for your triangle, you can mark it on your background piece. And then we are going to line it up. So our diagonal line should go corner to corner to find those markings that we just made. So you can see the little marking, and we line up our corner and corner. And of course, we're testing before we're sewing. You could pin this in place, pin on the line, and then fold it up, and you'll see that that will perfectly snowball that corner. A nice stitch and flip is what it's called. So go ahead and grab a sewing pin if you have one and pin it in place. Or you can simply choose to just hold it in place. We'll bring this over to our sewing machine and stitch directly on that line. Now, I promised an extra tip for saving all of these excess pieces of fabric. So I'll show you that right now as well. So something that you can do to save both of these and turn it into an additional quilt block is to mark an additional line. So we're gonna mark a line a 1/2 inch away from our first line. Right there. So now you can see I'm going to pin this again. We're going to stitch on this first line that we drew for our snowball, and then we're going to stitch again on the second line, and that will turn it into another HRT that we can use, a very small one that we can use on a different project. Now that we're at our sewing machine, we are ready to stitch. I will go ahead and sew on this first line, the one that actually snowballs the corner first. As you're going, obviously take out your pin and make sure that this corner down here is lined up with that marking. Now we can check our work and see how we did. When you fold it up, it should make a perfectly snowballed corner, and you'll be left with this HRT in that corner. Now, just as the extra choice, totally optional, I'm gonna stitch on that second line as well. You do not have to do this step. Now you can see we've sewn our 2 lines, even if you just sewed the 1 line. Next step is to go ahead and trim a 1/4 inch away from that first line, or in this instance, we'll just trim right in between our 2 seams. Now to trim, I go ahead and I place my ruler so that it's a 1/4 inch away from the seam for the snowball. And I cut right there. So now you'll see our snowball piece is ready to press, and we are left over with this piece that we can press and turn it into a separate quilt block. We'll just need to trim it down. Now it's time to press our snowballed 1/2 rectangle triangle. You can press towards the triangle if you choose. I recommend pressing open, but before we do, we'll go ahead and take our iron and set the seam, just pressing lightly. And then I'll flip it over and separate the seams with a little finger press and then press that seam open with the iron. Once you're done, you can flip it over and admire your work. You have now successfully done a half rectangle triangle using the snowball corner method. Now, if you followed along with me for the extra little quilt block as well, you can go ahead and press that seam open as well. It's a little trickier when they're this small, but it's more helpful if you're doing very large blocks and you would be wasting more fabric. So now we've got that piece as well. Thanks for taking the time to make this half rectangle triangle using the snowball corner method with me. I hope you found this tutorial helpful. If you are adding on this extra step and you need help trimming this HRT block, make sure you check out this tutorial for the full traditional method. It covers how to trim traditional HRTs, which is what this would be. If you are looking for a quilt pattern design to use this technique in, I highly recommend checking out the Luminary quilt pattern. This is a brand new quilt pattern in my shop, and you can learn more about it right here. The pattern includes 3 sizes. All of the quilt blocks use this simple technique, and it's actually really fun to make, super streamlined, and uses back quarters. So I hope you enjoy it. If you found this tutorial helpful, don't forget to subscribe here on YouTube. Drop a comment below. Let me know if you have any questions or just anything you liked about this tutorial. I would love to hear it. And of course, make sure you find me over on other social media as well. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, Pinterest, wherever at Homemade Emily Jane. Finally, if you want more quilting tips, tricks, and tutorials, check out homemadeemilyjane.com and use the search bar there if there's anything specific that you're looking for. I hope you have so much fun making your HRTs. Happy sewing!